Walt Disney, the man who made mice come alive, built castles out of air, and turned childhood dreams into gold. He started as a poor boy in a big family and became the owner of Hollywood's biggest animation studio, an empire of films, theme parks, and a fortune worth billions. He brought joy to millions of children through his creations, yet for years, Walt himself had no children, and that absence deeply pained him. Diane. Walt married Lillian Bounds, his studio secretary. 2 painful miscarriages haunted Walt and Lillian, making the birth of their first daughter nothing short of a miracle. When Diane was born in 1933, the Los Angeles Times ran a playful headline, "Mickey Mouse has a daughter." Walt was over the moon, already buying ponies for the child who hadn't yet drawn her first breath. Diane Marie Disney grew up in a house where fairy tales spilled out of storyboards and onto dinner tables. But Walt was determined that his daughters wouldn't become public property. After the shocking Lindbergh baby kidnapping, he and Lillian kept Diane and Sharon well shielded from the spotlight. Diane remembered her father as gentle, playful, almost like a boy himself. He taught them to ride horses, swam with them in the pool, even built props for their school plays. He wasn't the towering Walt Disney, just Dad. She recalled ordinary family moments that became extraordinary in hindsight. A lazy day at Griffith Park, Diane and Sharon riding the carousel. Walt sat on a bench, watching them go around and around, realizing that parents needed a place to have fun with their kids too. That simple afternoon gave birth to Disneyland. At the University of Southern California, Diane studied English and met Ron Miller, a football player she was set up with on a blind date. They married in 1954. People say Walt cried at the ceremony. Ron would later run Disney Studios, while Diane dedicated herself to raising their 7 children. They built a life together in Napa Valley, founding Silverado Vineyards and becoming pillars of local charity, supporting vineyard workers, health clinics, and a music festival. But Diane's later years were consumed by something else, protecting her father's true story. When Lillian died in 1997, Diane grew alarmed by the way Walt was being mythologized, or reduced to a corporate logo. She fought passionately for the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, refusing to let architects compromise on Frank Gehry's wild, ambitious design. Diane had been a pianist all her life, deeply passionate about classical music and a generous supporter of the arts. She and her husband Ron, who spent nearly 60 years together, adored nature. Diane loved skiing in Colorado and swimming in the ocean in Hawaii. In San Francisco, she co-founded the Walt Disney Family Museum with her son Walter. This was her final book about her father, people said, filled with real artifacts, recordings of Walt's own voice, and intimate glimpses that made him human, not just a brand. Diane passed away in 2013 at 79 after a fall. Diane had 7 children and 13 grandchildren who carry on the Disney legacy. Still, the fortune he built continues to shape their world. Many of his heirs devote themselves to philanthropy, supporting education, the arts, and humanitarian causes, just as Walt once dreamed his creations would make the world a little brighter. Yet most of them choose to live quietly, away from the spotlight that once followed their name. Sharon Mae Disney came into Walt and Lillian's lives in 1936, adopted as an infant. The Disneys kept the adoption private for years, wanting Sharon to feel every bit as theirs as Diane. Growing up, Sharon adored horses and had a soft spot for stray animals. Walt would surprise her with puppies, kittens, tiny tokens of affection from a father who struggled with big displays of emotion. Much like her sister Diane, Sharon grew up protected from the glaring spotlight. She once summed it up in a single, almost childlike sentence. "They never raised us to think my father was a great man. He was just Daddy." She remembered simple joys, trips to the park that first sparked the dream of Disneyland. In these moments, Walt was simply her father, not a titan of imagination. She and Diane were bound by that gentle, sheltered upbringing. In private letters, Walt often wrote of his hopes that Sharon would find her own joy beyond the expectations that came with being a Disney. In 1959, Sharon married Robert Brown. They had a daughter, Victoria, who was reportedly adopted too. But tragedy found them early. Robert died of cancer in 1967. Sharon was left a young widow, and then lost her father just 2 years later. She remarried in 1970 to William Lund, a developer who helped scout land for Disney. That same year, they welcomed twins, Brad and Michelle. Yet this marriage, too, cracked apart. Through it all, Sharon stayed largely out of public view. As a teen, she'd had a few bit parts around Disneyland, but her bigger role lay behind closed doors. She was an owner and director of Retlaw Enterprises, the private family company that managed rights to Walt's name and other assets. She also sat on the Walt Disney Company. Above all, Sharon poured herself into charity. She served as trustee for groups like Cal Arts, the arts college founded by her father. When Sharon died of breast cancer in 1993 at just 56, her philanthropic legacy didn't fade. The Sharon D. Lund Foundation, named for her, poured millions into causes she cherished. But there was a darker chapter, tied to the immense fortune she left her 3 children. Sharon's trusts, worth around $400 million, carried a clause. Payouts could be delayed every 5 years if trustees felt the heir lacked the maturity or ability to manage the money. What may have been meant as protection became a slow fuse for family conflict. Victoria reportedly struggled with addiction. She received her payout at 35, but died barely a year later, her share passing to Brad and Michelle. Michelle faced health crises too, including a brain aneurysm, but ultimately received her distributions at 35 and 40. Brad was different. Trustees withheld his payments at 35, 40, and again at 45, citing concerns about his cognitive abilities. Diagnoses were disputed, but their decision effectively locked him out of nearly $200 million. Brad fought back in court, accusing trustees of holding his inheritance hostage. The lawsuits turned bitter, pitting family members against each other, challenging competence, motives, and memories. Diane and Sharon grew up not just in the glow of a famous name. Their childhoods were filled with small, sacred moments. Yet their father was often far away, lost in worlds of his own creation, forever chasing the dreams of millions of other children, dreams that would one day outlive even him. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment on who you'd like to see next.